It's 2025 and you're in the market for a luxurious German SUV. You've got your mindset on either an Audi Q5 or a VW Tiguan. The Audi is £2,500 more expensive at 25 grand. And the similarly aged, similarly mileaged VW Tiguan is 2.5 grand cheaper at 22.5 grand. Only an extra 2.5 grand for a more powerful engine and a slightly better all-wheel drive system. And of course a slightly more luxurious interior. That's a no-brainer, you just go with the Audi, right? Well, not so fast, because there's things that this VW Tiguan behind me can do and things that it has that this Audi Q5 doesn't. So, which one do you pick? Well, today we are going to find out. But not only that, we're going to do a 0 to 60, a 30 to 70, see what MPG both of these cars do. That one's a diesel, that one's a petrol, so it's not really a fair test, but we're going to see anyway. We're going to see how noisy these cars are inside with a proper decibel reader. Is the Audi really any quieter inside? They're built on the same platform after all, and we're also going to test their sound systems. Is the B&O sound system in the Audi really worth the extra money? And of course, we are going to have some fun on a B-road, because my name's Tom and you are watching Paragon Cars. Let's get into it. Now then, before we get on the road, a quick look at the interior, because both of these cars are similarly old. I want to see which one has the worst or the best wear and tear. Let's start with the Audi. Now I know wear and tear is subjective based on usage, but I just want to see what state both of these cars are in. So starting with the driver's seat, Audi, not bad. A little bit of creasing here, a little bit of creasing down here. The VW though, even though it's a lower quality grain leather, it does seem to be just a little harder wearing, which is quite interesting. There's just less creasing, less really prominent folds in the leather. The steering wheel though is a different story. The VW is very shiny and very sticky, whereas the Audi steering wheel just seems to wear a little bit nicer. Interesting though. Then when it comes to the dash, the Audi is still nice and squidgy, no sun damage here as of yet. And the VW is kind of a similar story, still nice and squidgy. And the thing with the VW is, it's actually a little bit squidgier than the Audi is, but it's just not quite as nice in terms of its squidginess. Not quite as nicer to the touch, you might say. Now then, before we see what the VW Tiguan has that this Audi Q5 doesn't, let's start off around town in the Q5, talk about suspension and sound systems. Now, we're both on stock dampers in these cars, and the one thing you notice immediately is that the Audi, it's pretty much exactly the same in terms of stiffness, but it has a quality about the ride that is just slightly more refined, slightly more luxurious. There's less kind of pitching, less rolling, less pogoing over bumps that I notice, and you just feel a little bit more removed from the road than you do in the Volkswagen Tiguan. Then in terms of sound systems, this is where there is a huge disparity between the two. Now, I know you can get an upgraded system in the VW Tiguan, but it's just never going to be quite as good as the B&O system in this Audi Q5. In terms of noise level, the stock system in the Tiguan did 110 decibels. A good noise level, but nothing too insane. This Audi, however, did 120 decibels. That is 10 decibels more. And remember that decibels are logarithmic, so 120 is very different to 110. But then there's more to the story, because the VW Tiguan, obviously, you know, you're not going to use your sound system at full blast the entire time, because you're just going to damage your hearing at the end of the day, especially in this thing. But at the same noise level, the clarity and the quality of the sound in this Audi is just in a different dimension. Now then, in terms of seats around town, the Audi feels comfortable, doesn't really hold you in too much, and the leather feels nice. It feels really nice and smooth, nice and high grain. And one thing I love is that obviously you get this little extendable bit for your thighs as well, and you can adjust the pitch of the base of the seat, so you can get that real sweet spot with your chair. But the only thing is, it's a manual seat still. Now, at the end of the day, this is an S-Line car, so it's not a bog standard Audi Q5. It's pretty well optioned up, and we've still got manual seats. Like, stuff like that should really be standard in the Audi Q5. But then I suppose you look at the price of both of these cars. Maybe that's why they're closer in price than you might think on the used market. Now, in terms of parking, you both get parking sensors with your R-Line and your S-Line cars as standard, front and rear. This one has the optional reverse camera as well. And to be honest, the quality of the reverse camera is not good enough for 2025. This car came out in 2018, and even then, it wasn't really up to muster compared to its competitors. You do have lines telling you where you're going to go, the refresh rate is pretty good, and the parking sensors are nice and accurate. And one thing that they do is work well with bollards and things in the dark. Now, it's not quite as good as something like a BMW X3, for instance, because you actually get bars on the screen telling you, giving you that visual representation of how close you are to an object. Then getting out, it's easy. You can pretty much always get to the first notch on this thing because it's basically the same size as an Audi A4, fundamentally. And then the door closing sound sounds like this. And the VW Tiguan sounds like this. Which one do you prefer? Let me know in the comments. Coming out of junctions, we both have that dual clutch automatic gearbox. And it's a pretty good gearbox. It's not amazing per se, but there's not really anything necessarily wrong with it. It's not a Porsche PDK, and it's also not as smooth as the ZF8 speed that you would find in a BMW. But in its own way, it's very, very decent. Coming out of junctions, we got Quattro all-wheel drive, and you just give it half throttle, and this car just rockets up to speed. This is the EA 888 2-litre inline 4-cylinder turbocharged engine. This exact engine is actually the same one you would find in the Golf GTI Performance, and it is an absolutely amazing unit. It doesn't sound amazing, even for a 2-litre engine, even with an exhaust, but it delivers in terms of performance and economy. Economy-wise, you'll get about 38 miles per gallon in this car on a long journey on the motorway. Round town, you'll be seeing sort of low to mid-20s, but that's purely because this is just a big car and it's still just a 2-litre engine, so it's going to be using that turbocharger a lot of the time to do all the heavy lifting. But when you're just pootling around, it's so smooth. There's torque everywhere. Like, if I lock this in 4th gear and just plant my foot, it still picks up speed so quickly. It's really surprising how good this engine is. But anyway, I digress. Let's see what both of these cars do on the 30 to 70 sprint. This is 252 horsepower, 380 newton meters of torque. The VW Tiguan is 190 horsepower and 380 newton meters of torque. So same torque figure, but the Audi Q5's got quite a bit more power, and it's petrol power, so it's probably going to be quite substantially quicker. But let's find out. So Audi on the left, VW on the right. You can see the Audi Q5 did a time of 5.83 seconds and the Tiguan did 7.92 seconds. Now, interestingly, on the graph, they actually initially accelerate at the same pace. And I think that's because they've got a very similar torque figure. But as you can see, later on in the graph, the Audi just starts pulling ahead and obviously is a little bit quicker. Coming onto the motorway, the Audi Q5 is obviously quicker, but it does have to downshift more to get access to that power. Once you're there though, crikey. This thing is genuinely quite quick. And you get some DSG farts coming through the exhaust, which is quite cool. Remember, this is just the engine out of the GTI. Then we got a 7-speed gearbox, so if we get ourselves up to 70, get the cruise control on, come on. You sit at around 1950 revs, so nice and low in the rev band, which means it's just very, very relaxing and quiet in here. Suspension on the motorway, nice and supple, controls the weight of the car well. There is just nothing to complain about. It's perfectly damped, as is pretty much every Audi on the market. It's not jittery, it just does exactly what it says on the tin. just a little bit nicer than the VW Tiguan. In terms of sound deadening though, let's find out what both of these cars do. This is where the Audi does shine, on the same bit of road, at the same speed, with fairly similar tyres on the cars. I know tyres do make a difference, but it's actually not a huge difference when you're measuring things like wind noise mainly. The Audi Q5 did about 68 decibels, whereas the VW Tiguan was just over 70 decibels. And that is quite a difference. You do notice there's just a roughness in the sound with this car when compared to the Audi Q5. Now then, in terms of handling, no adaptive suspension in this. We've just got drive modes that do things to the steering and the throttle pedal basically, and the gearbox as well, of course. Gearbox in S, nice and responsive. Steering in the Q5 is obviously not amazing, but it's quite fast. It's nice. We've got dynamic steering, so the quicker you're going, the kind of less but more responsive it is. I don't quite know how to describe it, but it just feels sharper the faster you're going, basically. Then in terms of braking at the 100-yard marker, brakes just feel really nice in Audis. You barely have to touch the pedal to get a really nice amount of stopping power from them. And this engine, yeah, sweet as a nut. Handling is a good 8 out of 10 from this car. Very safe, very predictable, but not a huge amount of fun. But what will these cars do on the 0 to 60 sprint? Before we see what the handling's like on the Tiguan, let's see what both of these cars do 0 to 60. So 0 to 60, the Q5 obviously being the more powerful car, did a faster time of 6.17 seconds. However, the 190 horsepower Tiguan, thanks to its surprisingly aggressive launch control, did a time of 7.88 seconds. So just under 2 seconds behind is not bad, considering the power difference. Now, Tiguan handling, we're starting with the handling first, because it's actually quite interesting. You would assume the Audi Q5 is going to be the more sporting car, but even though this is kind of a little bit rougher around the edges, the Tiguan actually has a slightly quicker steering rack, so only 2 turns lock to lock compared to the Audi Q5's around 3. So the steering feels a little bit quicker, and you kind of feel just more car-like rather than SUV-like in terms of seating position. So it feels like you're driving a Golf rather than an SUV. But then you kind of look behind you and it's like you've got a big car back there. It's a bit weird, really. But it does just feel a bit edgier compared to the Q5. In terms of brakes, pretty much the same setup. So it feels pretty much the same. Really nice, really confidence-inspiring, nothing to complain about. And then we come on to the things that you get in this that you don't really get, or well, you don't get in the Audi Q5. One, in the interior, you get felt lining in the door cards, which makes quite a substantial difference to me in just like everyday usage, because I can put all my crap in there and I don't have to worry about it rattling around. Whereas in the Audi, you do have to worry about that. And then there's just like other little things that VW have thought of that Audi haven't quite nailed. And that's things like this little bit of storage on the dash. That is great for coins. And then the other thing for me, which is quite surprising, is that the washer system for the screen wash is like a fan on the VW, whereas it's this like horrible just 3 little squirters that go onto your windscreen in the Audi. And do you know what? They come out of alignment really quickly in Audis. The amount of Audis I've owned or just driven where you like try to put your screen wash on and it kind of just squirts in a completely random direction. It kind of detracts from what you think would be quite a nice luxurious experience. And then the other thing you get as standard that you don't get in the Q5 is this adaptive cruise control system. You get this as standard on pretty much every model and trim level of the VW Tiguan you can get. And to be honest, it makes quite a big difference. At the end of the day, this is a family car, and you are going to be doing just long, boring motorway journeys and the thing. So having the ability to have the car do most of the work for you is actually really nice. And it's one thing I wish Audi did in that generation of Q5. You don't even get cruise control as standard on a lot of the models, which is absolutely abysmal. And then in terms of parking the Tiguan, obviously you get parking sensors as standard. They are basically, I mean, they are the same as the ones you get in the Q5. One thing I will say though is that the wing mirrors in the Q5 are slightly bigger, so you're actually able to see a little bit better when you're not having to move your head around so much. Then in terms of fuel economy, not that it really matters between these two cars because one's petrol and one's diesel. This will do pretty much 45 mpg most of the way around town, and on the motorway, on the combined cycle, you can see above 50 if you're driving it very sensibly, but most of the time you're going to be in the sort of low to mid 40s, so obviously better than the petrol equivalent, but it's slower, so there is a trade-off. In conclusion though, what would I go for? Personally, I'm still going to stick with the Audi Q5 because it's only £2,500 more, and it just feels more luxurious. And if I took both the badges off the cars, ignore the badges for a second, the Audi just has this quality to it that it's like an extra 10% in all areas and 20% in others, and it just feels nice. It just makes you happier when you're sitting behind the wheel, and when you're sitting in it you just get a better view. Like, the interior of this is fine, but it's very functional, it's very boring. I know the Audi is as well, but it has a quality to it. Like, the screens are a slightly higher resolution, everything's a bit smoother, the knurling is nicer. There's just more going on for your eyes to kind of digest, whereas you don't really get that in the Tiguan. The Tiguan is just, all right, you want to get from A to B as comfortably as possible, here you go. I'm talking about comfort though, that's where the Audi is, again, 10%, just a little bit better. You can get a bit better of a driving position, and the seats are they just don't hurt you as much on a longer journey. The Tiguan, you do kind of get out of it after a couple of hours going like, ooh, with your back, whereas the Audi, you just don't really do that. You just get out and you feel as good as new. It's all those things that really do add up, and to be honest, that's why I'm going to pick the Audi Q5 as the winner for this test. Do you think I'm right, or do you think I'm wrong? Let me know in the comments. Anyway, as always, I hope you enjoy content like this. If you did, give us a like, and why not subscribe? As not only can you see more content like this, you can see everything we have for sale, which includes both of these cars in the video. There'll be links down in the description below for both of these cars. If you're not interested in a VW product, then there'll be a link to our generic website as well, where you can check out the plethora of other things we have for sale. Anyway, as always, my name has been Tom, and you have been watching Paragon Cars. I'll see you guys on the next one. Cheers.